United States President Donald Trump has just delivered his first address to a joint sitting of the U.S. Congress after a month in office. He detailed his plans for the year, including a healthcare overhaul and military build-up. To tell us more, let's cross live now to our U.S. correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. He's in New York, so we say good morning to him, even though it's very much so good evening to you in your side of the world. How are you doing there, Sherwin?
Yeah, it's about 11:22 p.m. on Tuesday evening in New York. And I tell you, I think we're all doing a little better after President Donald Trump's inaugural address to a joint sitting of the United States Congress. Of course, they don't call it a State of the Union quite yet, Leanne, because it's so soon after his inauguration. And I tell you, the pivot that analysts, that Americans, that people across the aisle have been waiting to see, a more sort of presidential posture from this president, well, I can tell you that I think they got it tonight. Good. This was a president that used words like empowered, inspired, Leanne, hope, dream big, bold and daring, and really it was a warm speech. It was a speech in which he even spoke about possible immigration reform, calling on Democrats and Republicans to work together to make America great again. I mean, this is the kind of rhetoric that we haven't heard from this president. He spoke about an overhaul and, as you mentioned in your introduction, a repeal and replacing Obamacare, former President Obama's signature healthcare legislation, but also then talking about retaining some of the elements of that law. Of course, Republicans still don't have a replacement quite ready yet, and if you've witnessed the news bulletins reflecting some of the scenes across this country, where members of the House of Representatives, members of the Senate have been confronted by very, very angry voters across these United States about what exactly they are going to repeal this signature healthcare legislation with. But on the whole, Ryan, this was a positive speech and certainly something very different from the president we've seen over the last 40 days.
Well, I mean, I'm quite amazed at just reading some of the reviews after the speech. I mean, some of the things that he was saying, and many people don't recognize this in him, talking about the fact that he's national unity taking center stage. He showed a more measured tone. He avoided a repeat of his attacks on the Democrats and media organizations. It wasn't dark. It was a little bit more uplifting. And I think what he was really sort of amazed to be talking about was this whole integration of immigrants and not so harsh against them. What has happened?
I mean, I guess the moment dawned on him in many ways. And these were the opening remarks. This was the opening paragraph from his about, I would say, an hour, 15-minute speech tonight, as we mark the conclusion of the celebration of Black History Month, which is being celebrated for February in the United States. We are reminded of our nation's path towards civil rights and the work that still remains. Recent threats against Jewish community centers and vandalism of Jewish cemeteries, as well as last week's shooting in Kansas City. You'll, of course, be aware of the gunman that shot 2 Indian immigrants in a bar in Kansas City. Remind us that we may be a nation divided on policies. We are a country that stands united in condemning hate and evil in all its forms. I mean, this is quite a departure from the sort of scenes we saw at campaign rallies throughout his candidacy for presidency, the rhetoric, the hate that sort of would spill onto our television screens. This was a very different posture, from a lot of different rhetoric from the president. And then really the takeaway from this speech, given his focus, one of the pillars of his campaign, of course, as you well know, is building the wall and really dealing with the illegal immigration problem in this country. What we've seen over the last couple of weeks since he's taken office are mass deportations of illegal immigrants that have violated various laws while being in the country, traffic offenses, that kind of stuff. I believe that these are his words. I believe that the real and positive immigration reform is possible as long as we focus on the following goals: to improve jobs and wages for Americans, to strengthen our nation's security, and to respect the laws in this country. This is a huge departure from a president that didn't really talk about the need for immigration reform. This was Hillary Clinton's message. So a very, very different President Trump on our television screens tonight.
Yeah. Just in terms of Obamacare, however, I mean, he's not moving on that one. I mean, you can see that he wants it gone, and he's offered some options. During this particular address this evening, apparently, as we're reading, there were different versions of events. Talk to us about those.
Well, this is one of the big questions that are confronting lawmakers on Capitol Hill and around the country. And Republicans control both houses of Congress. They now have the ability to very quickly and very easily repeal and replace this law. The problem that they are facing is that this is a very complex law. When it was passed, it was over 1,000 pages. It deals with insuring over 20 million new people. It deals with reducing the price of prescription drug medication in this country. It's very complex, it's very layered, and it's not very easy to repeal. There are many millions of people that are benefiting from this new legislation, and it's going to be very difficult for Republicans to just repeal it without having something to replace it with. If they replace it with anything that then uninsures people, that takes away their ability to be insured despite having a pre-existing condition, for example, or allowing their children to remain on their health insurance until the age of 26, these are very real things that impact the lives of people across this country, middle-class people, poor people in this country. So Republicans, I think, Leanne, are really looking 2 years down the road to the midterm elections. Remember, there's an election cycle every 2 years in this country, and they'll be well aware that if they are to repeal this legislation and they don't have anything to replace it with, people are going to hurt that party in the polls in 2 years' time, I think 2018, 2019. So they're very, very precarious. It's a very precarious law. They're being very cautious about it. But the rhetoric is repeal and replace. Let's see how they do that.
Yeah. Just finally, in terms of the military, I mean, he is wanting to increase spend quite a bit there. But I'm also seeing some reports about a widow of a naval SEAL emotional at the Trump inaugural address. And this was something that I imagine he kind of spoke about and also worked towards winning over the confidence of Americans for increasing the spend in the military. What did you take out of that?
Well, this is a key Republican agenda item. Every time Republicans come into office, they talk about increasing spending on the military. That the Democrats haven't spent what the American military requires. Let's not miss the fact that Americans spend about $550 billion. $550 billion. I think that's almost the size of South Africa's GDP on military spending annually. And what he has proposed is an increase of around 10%, of about $54 billion to a military that is by far the largest in the world and the most expansive. So, good on the military and defense companies licking their lips at this prospect, but very much a feature of any Republican administration. They talk about America first, they talk about America's might and place in the world, and that's often based on the strength of the United States military. Not that it's gone down by much under the Obama administration, but here you have it. Republicans prepared really to spend about 10% of $550 billion to expand the biggest military in the world.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there. But I have to ask you one question. Was Kellyanne Conway kneeling on a couch taking any photographs during the address?
Well, they say she was amputated by the so-called Bowling Green massacre. Remember the Bowling Green massacre that didn't happen?
Yes.
Well, she was amputated, and that's what you see on the couch in the Oval Office.
I had to ask that question. Thank you, Sherwin. Thanks so much for being with us here on the program, and have a good sleep. I'm sure you've deserved it. That's Sherwin Bryce-Pease. He's our U.S. correspondent. That joke was that picture. I'm sure you may have seen it. It was the White House advisor, Kellyanne Conway, and she's kneeling on a couch in the White House taking a photograph with her shoes on. It's just one of those memes, and it's crazy. Anyway.